The FIA might have just made the worst decision in their career of bad decision-making, costing them millions and possible drivers and fans down the line. As the FIA, F1's Motorsport Association, has now revealed that drivers will face harsh penalties if they cause a fuss or discredit stewards. Formula One drivers are the hardest harmed in such circumstances. The lowest fine of €10,000 is immediately increased to €40,000 for a King-class driver, as Formula One monetary penalties are compounded 4 times. Anyone who commits the offence 3 times in 2 years will be suspended for 1 month and fined more than a ton. In addition, championship points will be deducted. And this has all been decided without contacting the drivers, leaving them more than infuriated. And above all, some drivers have once again threatened to retire due to these ridiculous rule changes. So, FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem is working harder to establish himself. Last September, he remarked that specific language used by drivers should be discontinued. Max Verstappen was promptly sentenced to community service after using the F word during a news conference. Ferrari driver Charles Leclerc did the same a few races later, but only received a €10,000 punishment, half of which was conditional. Under the new criteria, that would amount to a €40,000 unconditional fine. The 20 Formula One drivers agreed that this is going too far. Over 2 months ago, the GPDA union issued an open letter to Ben Sulayem requesting that such sanctions be lifted. The fines were deemed wrong and detrimental to the sport's image, and the drivers demanded to know what the money was being used for. Ben Sulayem was completely unimpressed by this. Speaking about it, he stated that it is not their business, and that drivers should concentrate on racing rather than other activities. In addition, a new penalty system is being implemented. This is causing a lot of outrage on social media among fans, and according to sources from various quarters, the drivers are also upset about it. For its side, the FIA claims that it is now evident to the stewards on duty what penalties to impose for specific spoken words. Stewards can nevertheless impose a reduced penalty in the event of extenuating circumstances, for example. One may anticipate what Verstappen thinks of the most recent happenings. After receiving a community service penalty in Singapore in September, he decided to say almost nothing during official FIA press conferences for the rest of the weekend before speaking to the written media on his own initiative shortly afterwards. Again, the 4-time world champion is likely to use his right to remain silent more frequently to avoid getting into trouble. Verstappen, in particular, is frequently praised for always voicing his thoughts and being straightforward. When you have to deal with stuff like this, it definitely affects my career in Formula One, Verstappen told reporters in Singapore. Of course, it's great when you win races and become champion, but you also want to have a good time. This way, I cannot be myself. Verstappen's early retirement becomes more likely in this scenario, considering he currently has a contract with Red Bull until 2028. Even Formula One management, which has been diametrically opposed to the FIA on multiple occasions in recent years, will be less than pleased with the Motorsport Federation president's newest hunch. So, under these new guidelines, Formula One drivers will face point reductions and bans for misconduct breaches. The guidelines were made public with the formal release of the FIA's 2025 International Sporting Code, which includes Appendix B. Appendix B was previously the FIA's Code of Good Conduct. However, it is now where stewards' penalty guidelines are written, with the ISC altered to point to those rules. The new document has 5 particular elements that outline the mandated penalties for breaches of various entries in Article 12.2.1 of the ISC, specifically subsections F, L, N, O, and P. It implies that, for example, causing moral injury or loss to the FIA or its officers, a violation of paragraph F, now carries a stipulated first offence penalty of €10,000. However, the paper also states that multipliers will be applied to the base fee based on the competition level, with a separate tier earmarked for F1, in which base fines would be multiplied by 4. It means that causing moral injury or loss to the FIA as an F1 driver will now carry a penalty of €40,000 on the first offence, €80,000 on the second offence, plus a suspended 1-month suspension, and €120,000 on the third offence. The same penalty structure now applies to any public incitement to violence or hatred, as well as any misconduct, as specified in Article 20, Definitions, of the ISC. It defines misbehaviour as the general use of language that is offensive, insulting, coarse, rude, or abusive, as well as acts of assaulting and incitement to acts falling into either of the two preceding categories. Max Verstappen's punishment for swearing at the Singapore Grand Prix weekend last year, which enraged F1 drivers, was handed owing to a violation of that very misbehaviour rule. The general making and display of political, religious and personal statements or comments notably in violation of the general principle of neutrality promoted by the FIA under its statutes, unless previously approved in writing, is also to be fined and penalised under the same structure, albeit with the added requirement of the offending party issuing a public apology and repudiation of comments. The guidelines additionally stipulate that FIA stewards have the authority to decide what penalty to enforce, and thus retain the discretion to take into account any mitigating and/or aggravating circumstances, as well as the nature and the location of the event. The modifications follow a high-profile incident involving Verstappen at last year's Singapore Grand Prix, which sparked a standoff between the world champion and the FIA. Verstappen was sanctioned for swearing during an FIA press conference in Singapore, just days after FIA President Mohammed bin Sulayem announced plans to crack down on foul language. In a contentious speech, bin Sulayem claimed that F1 must differentiate between our sport and rap music. Verstappen was required to undertake some work of public interest, and later appeared alongside bin Sulayem at a grassroots motorsport community event in Rwanda before of the FIA prize-giving ceremony in December. In response to his suspension, Verstappen staged a protest for the rest of the Singapore Grand Prix weekend, remaining visibly silent at FIA press conferences and providing a series of brief responses. After qualifying at Marina Bay, Verstappen had an impromptu media gathering in the paddock immediately following the official FIA session. Verstappen's attitude was endorsed by his other drivers, including 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton, who publicly advised Verstappen not to serve his sentence. Lando Norris also called the action against Verstappen pretty unfair. Verstappen's protest spread to motorsport, with 8-time World Rally champion Sébastien Ogier similarly holding a quiet protest after being penalised for comments made during an interview at the end of a stage. The FIA's new criteria have been viewed as a bold attempt to keep drivers in line in F1 2025 and avoid a repeat of the standoff with Verstappen in Singapore. In response to the governing body's action on Thursday, Red Bull couldn't resist delivering a witty retort to the modifications. The team's official Threads account posted a snapshot from Verstappen's impromptu media session in the Singapore GP paddock, with an emoji of a face raising a finger on its lips, and the caption, "If we speak." The title refers to a well-known YouTube video of Mourinho, the former Chelsea, Real Madrid, and Manchester United manager, refusing to give an interview after losing a match. In the whole video, when asked about the referee, Mourinho responds, "I prefer not to speak. If I speak, I am in big trouble. In big trouble. And I don't want to be in big trouble." Football managers are not permitted to question referees' integrity or imply bias in post-match interviews, with fines and touchline bans being regular punishments. Verstappen has regularly stated in recent years that he is likely to retire young, citing his dissatisfaction with several aspects of modern Formula One. In a recent Viaplay documentary, Verstappen stated that being punished like a little kid for his comments in Singapore had made him rethink his role in the sport. He said, "That's something I don't like about F1. Of course, I understand that you can't swear in a press conference, but it was an expression that came out very quickly. We all grew up like that. People sat there too. And some people say, my 5-year-old grandson is watching this too. When I was 5 years old, I was also sitting among adults and swearing. You want to behave harshly like a child towards others. That's part of it. Of course, you have to watch your language, but to be punished like a little kid makes me wonder, what are we doing in this sport? What do you think?" Will this be one of the rules that might end up making Verstappen leave the sport? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below.